Hello students, welcome back to the Analyst for 3rd of July 2024, where we will be discussing the most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. We'll be discussing 9 articles. Starting with the very first one, we'll be discussing about Shanghai Cooperation Organization. In the next one, we'll be looking into the various aspects of improving rural internet connectivity. In the third one, we'll be looking into a recent proposal for a PLI scheme with regard to critical minerals recycling. In the next one, we'll be looking into the recent allegations into the short selling case allegations of the Adani affairs. And in the fifth article, we'll be looking into the various terminologies pertaining to parliament sessions. And in the final part, we'll be looking into some of the most important articles from prelims point of view, which will be aiding and enhancing your understanding of the prelims examination. So stay tuned. So students, in the very first article, we'll be looking into the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, or SCO in short. Recently, India's External Affairs Minister visited Kazakhstan for the ongoing summit that is taking place for SCO. And it is to be noted that Kazakhstan right now is hosting the summit for this year. And it is very, very noteworthy also to note that our Prime Minister Modi is not present at the summit. Instead, in his place, he sent the External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar to attend the meetings with reference to India's participation in SCO, because India is a member of the SCO. And here it is very, very important that we discuss the very basics of SCO in the beginning and also discuss the various implications of this recent move by India. And it is very, very important for your prelims to focus on the current events of national and international developments, where we have seen various questions on SCO, a question of which we'll be also seeing at the last part of this discussion. And also with reference to GS2, we find that we have various international institutions, agencies and fora, their structure, their mandate, where we have to look at the same from the SCO point of view. And when we talk about SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the headquarters is at Beijing. Please do not confuse the headquarters of SCO to be at Shanghai, which is in China, right? It is at Beijing, China, and it is actually a pan-Eurasian organization which is focusing on the collaboration based on economic, military, security and various other issues when it pertains to the European and the Central Asian region. And currently we also see that many African nations are also expressing their interest of joining the SCO. So we cannot tell that it is a kind of only Asian or only European entity. It is also trying to spread its membership to all of the aspirational countries, especially the developing nations in this regard. And this is a very, very important organization because we know it is consisting of 42% of the global population and also around 32% of the global GDP. We understand that the countries, particularly the member countries like China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Pakistan, Tajikistan, Iran and Uzbekistan, they constitute a huge chunk of global population and also economic affairs and GDP. So that is what we understand, that SCO is a very, very critical organization when we consider India's own regional interests and also the world in general. It is, very different from the BRICS. The BRICS, which is actually a collaboration, a membership, or say an organization between Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa. So it is very, very different from BRICS, because it is not, BRICS is generally focusing mainly on the economic issues, but SCO is collaborating on the regional security issues, terrorism, ethnic issues and also religious extremism on these matters when it pertains to the regional issues. And when we look at the various developments of SCO from period of time, we find that for the very first time in 2001, via the adoption of the Shanghai Convention on the struggle against terrorism, separatism and extremism, the SCO came to being with the founding members such as China, Kazakhstan, Russia, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. So it is to be noted that India was not a founding member of the SCO. Okay. Now in 2002, the statute to encourage participation in the politics, trade, economy, technology, culture and education was signed, which is also famously known as the SCO Charter of 2002. Then in 2005, the SCO became an observer to the United Nations. So it got an observer status, it got a very, very important status with reference to SCO's representation in the United Nations. In 2007, SCO has over around say 20 large-scale projects related to various transportation, energy and telecommunication infrastructure projects across the entire region. It is to be noted that still yet India is not a part of this particular group. In 2012, Afghanistan received observer status, and finally in 2017, when India actually expressed its interest of joining the SCO far back from 2010, 12, 15 onwards. It was finally in 2017 on Russia's insistence, India was formally inaugurated or inducted in the SCO. And along with India's entry, Pakistan also followed by actually insisting China on the other side. So it is to be noted both India and Pakistan joined as members in 2017. And finally in 2021, the SCO membership became a little bit say one member strong, that is by the inclusion of Iran, and also other countries such as Egypt, Qatar and Saudi Arabia also became dialogue partners. And when we look at the observers in the SCO right now, we have Afghanistan, Belarus and Mongolia. As we can see, Belarus is actually a part of the European continent, but it is still there in the SCO as observer. We also have dialogue partners such as Armenia, Azerbaijan, Cambodia, Sri Lanka, Turkey, Egypt, Nepal, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. So we find that Egypt here is actually a part of the African continent, but again we find that various African nations are also expressing interest of joining the SCO in this matter. So this is very, very significant that also in the last year 2023, Saudi Arabia also expressed its interest to join the SCO. Now we have to understand the broad aims and objectives of the SCO in this matter. Firstly, it is about strengthening the mutual trust and promote neighborly relations between the member nations, because we have to understand that all of the nations here kind of share all their national borders with each other. So in a bold move to actually promote good neighborly activities behavior, this group is actually being conceptualized. And also for promotion in various aspects and areas such as politics, trade, economics, science, technology, terrorism and so on, the measures. So it is collaborating on this huge aspect. It is also collaborating on tourism, education, on matters of all mutual interest, and that is why the term cooperation is also present in the SCO. We also have the jointly ensuring peace, security and stability in the region. In this manner, it is kind of also acting like the NATO of the European Union, like the NATO of the European continent. Now in the comment section, please let me know why NATO is very, very important in the recent times. And finally, it is also about advancement to a new democratic, fair and rational global and political order. Why? Because so far from 1990s onwards, after the collapse of the Russia or say Soviet Union back then, we found that the USA became a prominent power to deal with. And here Russia would not stand still in this manner. And further from 2000 onwards, we see the rise of China. So it was in their interest back in 2001 to actually form a kind of a group which is not aligned with the Western nations, or say the US and the Western the Western European countries. So this is in their own interest, or say in their larger regional interest, to have their own global political, say sub-global, sub-political order in this manner, so that they can directly influence the rest of the global order. So this was the main aim and say objective. And when we look at the SCO structure, we find this is having the Council of Heads of State. It's also having the Council of Heads of Government, Council of Foreign Ministers, meetings of say various heads of ministries and departments, Council of National Coordinators, and obviously a very, very important portion is the RATS, or the Regional Anti-Terrorist Structure. So this is a very, very important organization, or say a part of a structure of the SCO, because it is directly dealing with the various security and anti-terrorism activities in this region. And particularly in this region, we have various nations, particularly a nation like Pakistan, which is also infamously known for terrorism and such acts. So it is to be seen that what is finally the main agenda and obviously the main functioning of these RATs with reference to terrorism and the various aspects of terrorism in the member nations. And here, when we look at the various importance of SCO for India, we find that it is actually seen by India and also by the rest of the members as the counterbalance to NATO, as we have discussed just now. And also it is trying to enhance the cooperation and security measures among the various members. It is also trying to help with terrorism activities, and particularly via the Islamic State terrorists, which are actually prevalent in the, say, eastern or say the western part of, say, Asia. And also we find that the increasing amount of economic cooperation that is actually fostered by the huge number of population, by the demography, by the market, and also via the potentiality of various trade routes and the various free trade agreements or FTAs that can be signed between the members. It is also it is to be understood that this is actually one of the main reasons of promoting SCO on a global agenda. And when we look at China, for China, promotion of their own One Belt and One Road initiative is very important for China, and this is actually being conceptualized through the, say, SCO in this manner. As we can see, One Belt, One Road, One Belt initiative from China is actually conceptualized as linking China via the old Silk Route that they had earlier. And if you can see, vast majority of the portion is actually passing through Central Asia and, say, through minor Asian regions, or say Western Asian regions, or say countries too. And also this project, this One Road, One Belt initiative, it is also trying to promote the maritime link between, say, China and the rest of the nations. While India is not very interested or enthusiastic about One Belt, One Road initiative, it is actually seeing China's this initiative as a major security flaw in the region. But still, China is pushing ahead with this, agenda within the SCO. And while on the other side, India is also pushing for our own infrastructural ambitions, and also the broader linkage with the Central Asian and the European region also within SCO. Firstly, with the induction of Iran, in which India played a very, very big role, say, inducting Iran in the SCO, right? The Chabahar port, as we have also seen in the previous discussions of Analyst, is a very, very important strategic port for India. And why it is important? Because from Chabahar port, as we can understand, right, from Chabahar port in this region, it is actually seeing, India is actually seeing the port as a gateway to the Central Asian region, and also the gateway to the European region too. It is also seen as, say, the main center or epicenter of India's extended economic, say, trade relations with the Gulf, region, and further beyond the Mediterranean to the European regions. So it is actually very, very important for India's side to promote this particular issues, particular, say, infrastructure projects via SCO. Secondly, we find that the international north-south transport corridor, as we can see in this map, this is the entire map or, say, route of the INSTC. And also, as we have seen in the recent times, we also have this India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, or IMEC, right? India is also promoting IMEC and INSTC via the SCO. While INSTC is actually using this route, which is actually shown here, which is an alternative to the Suez Canal here, right? It is actually using the Bandar Abbas and the various countries in between, connecting the various countries of Asia and Europe. So it is actually seeing the linkage of India's Mumbai to the rest of the world, or say to the European nation. While IMEC is actually trying to link the Indian ports, the western port, particularly Gujarat and Mumbai region, to the, say, Israel region via Saudi Arabia, and finally through the Mediterranean Sea to the, say, European region. So it is very, very important that we understand that India is actually trying to promote these kind of projects. But obviously there are issues. Firstly, the issue that we have seen is the issue of One Belt, One Road initiative of China, because India is saying this is a major security flaw, and also we have to understand that India is totally opposed, because this particular project is actually passing through India's Kashmir region, right? So this is also major security flaw that India is flagging, and among the other issues such as involvement of Pakistan, and also the various, say, larger ambitions of China to become a regional behemoth in the region, eclipsing India's influence or regional influence in the country, in the neighborhood nations. And also, traditionally, as we have seen, that India and Pakistan has been hostile. Presence of Pakistan in this particular SCO is also seen as becoming an obstacle to to the various progress, to the various projects within the SCO. Also, we see that the Russia and China, they are right now emerging as, very, very strong partners, particularly after the Ukraine after the Ukraine crisis. While the West, the entire of the West is actually against Russia and China, they are trying to promote their own interest in this manner. And while India and Russia are very close, but here India is actually inching away from China's initiatives towards Russia. So this is one of the issues that is actually present within the SCO. And also we have to understand the recent India's participation led by India's External Affairs Minister, apart from our own Prime Minister, in the SCO summit. So this is where we have to understand that there is this political and diplomatic dynamics that is taking place. Firstly, India's representation at SCO without the Prime Minister is kind of raising some eyebrows, right? Because we find that the major nations, all of the member nations here, their own prime minister, their own presidents will be attending the meeting, and in that place, in that same hierarchy from India is not present at the meeting. So this is one of the most important highlights that is coming out. Secondly, we have to understand that India is right now on a mode to engage with various Central Asian countries independently, apart from the SCO summit, right? So it has been seen that recently the External Affairs Minister has actually managed to sign some deals, sign some memorandums with the Kazakhstan Deputy Prime Minister and the various other political dispensation of this region. It is also trying to reach out to other Central Asian regions and nations to collaborate on the various local and matters that are pertaining to India's interest. When we look at the geopolitical implications of this particular move by India, we have to understand that SCO right now is expanding membership, and it is very, very important to be present at the SCO summit from a very, very important political side, right? So that is why we have to understand the various political experts are commenting that the absence of Prime Minister Indian Prime Minister at SCO this time is seen as kind of stepping away from the major initiatives for expanding membership, because India can actually help in various other countries to becoming a member. So that move, that objective, can be taking a backseat. Or also we can see that China and Russia's roles recently in this regional affairs is actually increasing over a period of time. So that is where India can also understand that India must be limiting China's, tentacles spreading to other regions. Next, when we look at economic and connectivity issues, the Astana declaration that will be adopted in this particular summit this year. So this will be a very, very major one when it comes to economic and various other affairs. So this is where India must be also be collaborating on, despite the presence of our own Prime Minister. And this is very, very important point to focus on, particularly of India's interest at developing Chabahar Port and the INSTC region. And this is also against Pakistan's own proposals of developing their own Qasim and Gadar port, right? So we have to understand that this particular motives by these nations such as Pakistan and China, these must be countered. And finally, India's long-term engagement strategy with SCO may be also taking a backseat because of this particular backing down, or our Prime Minister not visiting the SCO summit this year, because last two times, particularly in 2023 when SCO was held online, held virtually, and also the previous few years when in 2021-22, due to COVID issues, the various Central Asian leaders, they could not visit India. So there have been kind of a disconnect with the Central Asian region and also with the SCO members. So this is where India must be collaborating and try to promote this, because in the next few years, India will be be lukewarm, because the next within the 2 years, one of the summits will be taking place in China. So this is where India must be also gathering speed and gathering kind of diplomatic effort at promoting India's role in the scene. Now here we have a PYQ of prelims from 2022. I want the answer in the comment section. Please let me know what is the answer to this, where India is a member of which of the above. And within the same lines, we have in 2021 a very, very important question, that is critically examine the aims and objectives of SCO. What importance does it hold for India? So as we can understand, there have been various questions particularly 2 questions in recent years. So I want also this answer in the comments and also some of your perspectives, a brief summary of your answer in the comment section. In the next article, we'll be looking at a brilliant initiative by the IIT Bombay to actually formulate a network standard to promote or improve the rural connectivity in the Indian hinterlands. And this is a very, very important article for your UPSC prelims when we talk of economic and social development. For GS2, due to the various government policies and interventions for development in various sectors, particularly the rural sector. And in GS3, we have the infrastructural part where we have the telecom and internet connectivity in this particular syllabus. So let us look at first some important data. As you can see, from 2019, 20, 21, 22, 23, over a period of time, the overall internet users in India are increasing. And when we look at the various urban and rural figures, we find right now that more of the rural areas are actually accessing internet, and that is a very, very good picture, because more and more internet connectivity in the rural areas will be obviously enhancing the service delivery and also the awareness and also the inclusion of the rural population in the mainstream social media and in the mainstream internet using. So here we have to understand also, when we look at the gender gap, so this gender gap over a period of time, when it leads, or when we talk about the access to the internet, right, it is also narrowed down on an all India basis. That is, almost 54% of male population and 46% of the female population are on the internet on both the rural and urban sites. And also we can understand more than half of India's internet users live in the rural country, right? So we can understand around 54% of the internet users are actually from the, say, rural areas, right? And here when we look at some of the other types of comparisons, such as, say, the households that have computers, this are actually according to a Times of India report, right? So when we talk about the households that own their own computers, here we see that the rural India is actually backing behind. Compared to urban areas, only 4.4% of the rural areas actually use computers. And when we talk about, say, the households with internet facility, and when we look at this, we find that the urban areas are actually more, say, in number when it comes to the households having the internet facilities. And finally, the persons above the age 5 years, right, who have, say, a computer, can use internet, or say have used internet in the last 30 days, according to 2020 figures, we find that here, based on, say, both female and male, say, comparisons, we find that the main population have more access to, say, skills to operate computers, internet, and also access to internet in the last 30 days. And also in the same, we find that it is the urban areas always who are dominating in this particular skills, or say access to the internet. So while we understand that most of the rural areas are having internet users, maybe they do not actively use the internet through that manner because of various issues in the rural areas, such as lack of connectivity, high cost of, say, data packages, and say regional issues, geographical issues, mobile tower issues, and so on. So that is why this initiative has been brought, where we have to firstly understand some of the, say, important concepts as to how this thing is actually operating. Then only we will be understanding the most advanced part of the concept later. Firstly is understand simple things. This is actually the basic infrastructure architecture, how, say, your own basic 4G or 5G operators actually give you internet access, or say voice access, voice call access. Firstly, we must be having our own devices, such as laptops, mobile phones, and so on. So we can connect them to the internet, right? For example, we have 4G, 5G connectivity. Our 5G phones are actually connected to something which are known as base stations, right? These can be of two natures. Firstly, they can be of wireless say access network. They can be of fixed access network. Fixed access networks are generally, say, optical cables, broadband lines, and so on. Wireless access networks are like your 4G, 5G connections, right? 2G connections, and so on. So we find that firstly, a laptop to be connected to the internet, it has to be firstly connected to the fixed access network, or say the wireless access network. So here in this wireless access network we have these mobile towers, in this fixed access network we have this broadband lines and so on. And finally they themselves connect to something which we know as core network. Core network means that there are various servers based in Tokyo, New York, London, Paris and so on, which we understand is actually the internet. That means in this particular area, right, there can be two types of networks, one fixed and wireless, and obviously these are connected to the internet via these core networks. So this is simply how mobile devices or say connectivity networks are actually operating. But we have to understand there are some challenges in the rural connectivity. Firstly, when we understand the tele-density or the number of mobile phone users per population in urban areas, we find it is 127%. That means one person is having maybe one or two or more mobile devices. But that percent is dropping down in the rural areas, right? That is only at 50%. That means maybe 1 out of 2 individuals in the rural areas are having mobile phones, right? And also digital connectivity. And also when we look at the digital divide, as you have also seen in the Times of India report, in the data previously, there is prominent digital divide based on the various rural population, also female population. And finally, there are some barriers in the rural area, such as low population density, and this is why the telecom companies are not actually interested to set up mobile towers or broadband areas or say broadband connections in this region, because they cannot earn more profit simply due to low population density, right? So there is a lack of private sector presence, and also there are many villages, there are many rural areas which are very remote, right? This is also causing a concern in this region. And finally, the rural areas are also having people with lower income levels. Because of this, they cannot also sometimes afford the connections. So this is where a revolutionary process or say technology has been developed by IIT Bombay. And please do remember to mention this definitely in your mains answers. Definitely when we talk about rural mobile connectivity or infrastructure when it comes to telecom and so on, right? So do not forget to mention this. Now understand this very carefully. Here we have seen in this overall architecture we had this wireless and fixed access network. Now if we can look closely here, what we have done or what IIT Bombay has done is actually separating various villages, for example village Y, village X's, right? And they have made a cluster of such villages where they had set up some basic, say, mobile towers. Now, these mobile towers are actually advanced Wi-Fi signal receptors because they are connected to broader or bigger mobile towers where actually the signals are being transmitted to. And finally, this is linked to the internet. Right, so it means that there will be a central tower in the region and there will be various clusters of villages. Now these clusters of villages will be having some local Wi-Fi receptors or say long Wi-Fi say frequency receptors, and from these Wi-Fi frequency receptors people in the local areas will be having access to internet. Now if you may ask me that if people are using internet, they can actually avail of this facility, but what happens if they have to make calls using say 4G networks, 2G networks or 5G networks, or even in the future 6G networks? So these towers are so specialized that they will be routing the calls which are not using internet facilities. They will be routing the calls via these signals, via these antennas directly to this server. So this is where we have to understand this macro BS wireless link or this broad basic tower is actually distributing the signals to these clusters of villages. Now these clusters of villages has been the innovation here, because we find that we can easily create a cluster of villages and we can install local installations of these micro towers there and we can connect them with the internet facilities. And this is a very innovative one and a very cost saving one also, because these micro mobile towers will be transmitting the internet connectivity and the call connectivity in all the say population in that particular village cluster, right? So this is how this works. And here let us understand some of the components here. Firstly, this has been developed by IIT Bombay, and also do remember the name of the Professor Abhay Karandikar. And here the main network architecture is actually the heterogeneous access network. This is actually the heterogeneous access network. Why? Because this access network is combining both wireless right? Wireless networks, and also it is also combining the voice calls and the various facilities, and also it has a feature to link the optical fiber network in the, or say broadband network in the village clusters in the future, right? And this will be combining the various base stations in the various regions. And when we talk about the macro tower that we have seen, right, it will be covering large coverage areas but lower data rates. So it will be not having higher data rates, it will be having lower data rates to actually distribute to the rest of the villages. It will be also having this Wi-Fi facility to provide high connectivity in the village areas. And also the seamless connectivity will be ensured. That means the devices can be switching between Wi-Fi and macro BS without service disruption, right? That means whatever laptops, say mobiles and so on, they're connected, they can be connected to the clusters. They can even connect to the main macro BS center, that is the main macro BS in this region, right? So this will be a proper unified control for various heterogeneous actors, that is both wireless, say optical fiber and so on. Now the middle mile network, right, where optical fiber is unavailable, right, it will be using multi-hop wireless connectivity, right? Multiple wireless links to cover long distances will be set up. That is, this kind of clusters will be set up in various intervals to actually say transmit the Wi-Fi signal over a long range of areas, right? And also it will be in the say coming time, it will be also using technologies such as satellites or long range Wi-Fi towers, right? So this is actually very, very beneficial for the entire village landscape, which is trying to say increase the amount of mobile connectivity in the region. Now there is a practice question for you all. The IEEE 2061-2024 standard presents a window of opportunity for digital India. Do you agree? I want all of your summaries of answers in the comment section and let me know what do you think of this particular rural internet connectivity. In the next one, we'll be looking at a very important initiative of promoting PLI scheme, Production Linked Initiative, within this critical minerals recycling industry. And this is a very, very important one, particularly after the recommendations of the Niti Aayog, and also complementing the efforts on, say, the policy agendas or the battery waste management rules of 2022. It is very important from your UPSC prelims perspective with reference to general issues on environment, ecology, biodiversity and climate change, and also with reference to GS3, infrastructure, conservation and environmental pollution and degradation. Now firstly, we have to understand some keywords. Firstly, when we talk about critical minerals are like lithium, cobalt, nickel, vanadium, say other kind of rare earth elements or REEs, right? They are used in electric vehicles, in our smartphones, in our laptops, in your monitors, everywhere in the electronic worlds. These are known as critical because they are concentrated in some portions of the world, right? Such as say the Latin American regions, and their production and supply chain is also dominated by some other sets of countries such as China, Australia and so on. So their supply chain, their distribution, their resource in itself is very scarce. But this scarce resource is used in a lot of electronic appliances, particularly in these digital times. So this is where we have to understand these minerals are critical because of their use. Particularly if we can look at some 2-3 examples of critical minerals such as lithium, which are used in rechargeable batteries, ceramics, cobalt used in batteries, super alloys, nickel used in super specialty steel, alloys, batteries, and also as we can see here in various machinery use, fiber optics, super alloys, construction, transportation and so on. So these are all the various critical materials that are being used in various electronic items. But we understand that electronic items also generate one very hazardous and dangerous thing which we know as e-waste or electronic waste. Once we say, for example, discard of this electronic pen or say our smartphone, where it ends up? It ends up probably in the landfills. And we know that our smartphones, our electronic items, they have various chemicals, various elements, various minerals which are harmful for the environment. And this is where we have to understand the menace posed by the e-waste is very, very dangerous, right? And in India, we can understand as of 2022, right, according to our private NGO, we find that 70% of the e-waste in the country is generated due to computer equipments, followed by say telecommunication, electronic equipments, medical equipments, and other things. Even when we understand India is trying to promote, for example, the solar power energy. So what happens to the solar photovoltaic cells once they are at the end of their life of use? So obviously they will be dumped, right? But we understand that these cells, and say for example say the batteries of EV, right, they contain lithium, they contain cobalt, they contain various of these elements, right? And India, for example, is 100% dependent on the rest of the nations for these critical minerals and rare earth elements. So India, we have to understand, it is kind of consuming a huge number of electronic items, and also it is also disposing a huge number of electronic waste. So as one of the consequences, as we can find, firstly, this is harmful to the environment. Secondly, if India somehow tries to reuse this, recycle this, right, and use these critical minerals to manufacture the future critical minerals, so it will be saving some of the import bills, and also be doing good to the environment, right? So this is where this concept of urban mining is coming into picture, because most of the e-waste, it has been seen, most of the e-waste, more than 50-60% of the e-waste is actually generated in the urban areas. And by urban mining, that means we actually want to say harvest the e-waste of our urban areas and say process them and say treat them to get out the critical minerals and manufacture new critical minerals, or say manufacture new electronics with those critical minerals. And apart from this, also the battery waste management rules, as we have seen in the context also, they also promote recycling of used lithium ion batteries from EVs starting from 2026. While right now we understand, particularly from 2018-19 onwards, India has been promoting hugely for the promotion of EVs. Now we know that EVs over a period of time, they have a shelf life of around 6, 7, 8, 9 years maximum. So we understand from 2026 onwards, there will be a huge chunk of Indians who will be actually going with their EVs to various stations to exchange their batteries, to actually buy new batteries. Now, what will be happening to those batteries? They have to be recycled. So this is where again this concept is coming into place. So this is where we have to understand Indian government has promoted and say conceptualized a production linked incentive schemes for those companies. For example, this is a company A which is doing what? Which is actually purchasing all the e-waste. This e-waste can be say solar batteries, this can be say electronic vehicle batteries, this can be say computer motherboards, graphics card, PCs, laptops, smartphones, and so on. So these companies, they purchase this e-waste from various say sources. These sources instead they collect the e-waste from the people and the various companies. So this company A is actually purchasing all the e-waste and it is investing in sensitive equipments, machines, and so on to actually process this e-waste and extract the critical minerals out of them, and finally supplying the critical minerals to the companies which are producing say equipments, electronic items, or they can even have or say their own company which is producing electronic components and items and so on. So this is actually a scheme, production linked incentive for say the critical minerals recycling industry to promote more and more activities in the recycling sector. Let me give you an example here. Firstly, if you can see, there are various electronic items such as earphones. These earphones, these basic earbuds, is containing a very important rare earth element known as dysprosium. Our own hybrid batteries, they contain lanthanum, right? For example, say the aluminium production, they also contain scandium. So these are the various rare earth elements which are actually used in various other electronic sectors. So this is actually the process of gathering the industrial and urban waste materials using leaching and various other activities to get the rare earth elements and other critical minerals, and finally we can actually get the raw material of this manner, and finally we can generate new products. So this is the main aspect of this production linked incentive. So this will be giving incentives to those companies who will be recycling the electronic items and e-waste and getting the critical minerals, and they will be getting the incentive. Why? They will be getting the incentive over increasing sales over a period of time. That means, for example, say in year 1 they sold critical minerals, they processed and sold critical minerals worth 100 crores. In year 2, they sold 120 crores. So they will be getting incentive, for example, say ranging within 3% to around 20%. For example, in our case, take as 10%. So they will be getting 10% cashback from the government on this extra 20 crores, right, that they sold between year 1 and year 2. So for example, 10% of 20 crores is 2 crores. So this company will be getting 2 crores, and this is actually a huge impetus or say bonus for the companies there, right? And this is a proposal which is right now being circulated by the Mines Ministry, and right now the target is recycling e-waste to extract the critical minerals. The feedback and collaboration will be sought from the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy and also Ministry of Heavy Industries, because of say the various electronic items which use the critical minerals, particularly from the domains of these two ministries such as solar, wind, energy policies, EV development and so on. And the incentives will be in this manner of say 10%, 20% rewards, which will be actually announced later because it is right now in proposal stage. And also amount of incentive will be on the basis of type and value of the product. And here, the industry, the e-waste industry and the various recycling industry, when it comes to critical minerals, they're actually having some perspectives. Firstly, we have to understand that critical minerals are the building block for the green and digital economy. So if you're trying to recycling them, it is itself a green activity in itself. And recycling will be leading to advanced manufacturing, various intermediate process, and also various exploration, research, and various extraction process also. And this is actually promoting something which we know as circular economy. And that is why we understand this will be needing new mining operations in the nation. For example, recently, India found a huge source of lithium in the Jammu and Kashmir region, but extracting it will be leading to deforestation, ecological destruction. And that is why we find that if we try to recycle the critical minerals, we will be having less burden or less pressure to do mining operations. And this will be also leading to reduction in import bills, as we can see, as we have also seen the list, that it has, India is actually 100% dependent on the lithium, cobalt and so on. And also, Niti Aayog has suggested some parameters for this recycling. Firstly, the types of minerals being recovered must be particularly specified, right? Secondly, efficiency of recovery and particularly technology, the processes, they must be scientifically designed. And finally, the utilization of materials must be in the domestic country. That is, they cannot be, say, exported, or they must not be exported, because India is dependent on, say, these materials. So whatever source, India is actually extracting from them, India must be utilizing them domestically. But there are some two challenges here. Firstly, the cost implications, particularly the technologies that is actually used to sort out recycle these critical materials. These are very expensive. So apart from PLI scheme, maybe the government needs to also promote another fund to set up this new say industry in this sector, and also give some funds to the existing industries to improve their technology. And finally, the industrialists are also concerned between the two types of recycled critical minerals, that is the high purity ones, which are actually very pure grade. So some class of the industrialists are actually focused on only high purity critical mineral recycling, because this is a very pure source of critical minerals, right? There are absolutely no source or chance of any counterfeit of critical minerals here. But some other groups are also proposing another kind of critical minerals where the electronic items are shredded, and the shredded electronic materials, from them finally the critical materials are extracted. We understand this is more cost friendly. This will be reducing the cost, because you have to shred and then you have to melt the plastic, and finally the critical minerals will be separated. But high purity one is very expensive. So there are two choices, and here the government of India must be clearly delineating the regulation guidelines for these two sets of recycled manner. Now, another question for you all for your mains. that is the need to incentivize the growth of critical mineral recycling has become all the more important or urgent in the recent times. Explain the statement in the light of the proposed PLI scheme for recycling of critical minerals in India. Please let me know of the summary of your answer in the comment section, and please do participate, because the more answers you write, the more summaries you will be writing, the better clarity and better retention you will be having during the examination. So please do participate in the comments. In the next one, we'll be looking into the fresh Adani case highlights, where recently Hindenburg has received some show cause notice from SEBI, and this is where the Hindenburg is actually commenting on giving allegations from or some other issues in the case, some new issues in the case. And this is a very, very important concept for UPSC prelims, particularly to the with reference to short selling thing that we'll be understanding here. Now, to understand short selling, imagine there is one broker. Now this broker is, for example, having the shares of Adani, right? For example, this particular broker is having 100 shares worth 10 rupees each share, right? And for example, you are someone who is actually a short seller. Now, to understand who is a short seller, you have to understand the entire process. Now, understand you are a short seller, and what you do, you contact your broker friend, you tell that friend, you give me the 100 shares of this particular price. For example, you right now have not purchased, but you have borrowed the shares from the broker, and here you have borrowed shares of worth 1000 rupees, right? And for example, imagine this 100 shares is a huge number, for example, right? And what you do immediately after you borrowed, right, you immediately sold the shares in the market. Now you understand you are selling 100 shares, and the supply of Adani shares have increased, and whenever the supply of the shares increase, right, the volume of the shares increase, right, when it is on the selling side, the price of the shares goes down, right? So this is what happens, that you intentionally borrowed and you intentionally sold the shares in the market to decrease its price. Now what you do, at this lower price, right, you purchase these shares. For example, the price is now at 5 rupees. Now you are incurring a cost of say 500 rupees, right? Now again at 5 rupees you purchase 100 shares back, right? And what you did, you actually borrowed, you did not buy for the first time, and right now after you purchase, you returned back the 100 shares. But the only difference right now is that right now the shares are not of 10 rupees, right now it is of 5 rupees. And the broker is seeing that, okay, I gave you 1000 rupees when you borrowed from me, but you returned me back 500 rupees, right? This is actually a 500 rupees loss for the broker and 500 rupees profit for you, because when you sold this share, remember, you got 1,000 rupees from the market, right? And with this 1,000 rupees only, you bought 500 rupees worth of share, right? Because the price decreased, and the rest of the 500 rupees you get back to the seller. This is exactly what Hindenburg research does. And this is exactly what short selling is. This is exactly who short sellers are. So they intentionally sell huge number of shares in the market of a particular company, and they intentionally decrease the price of that shares they have borrowed from their brokers or say from other institutions, and they finally sell them and finally buy them back and finally return them back to the broker. This is how they generally earn the money in the market. And you may understand, you may be questioning why Hindenburg is doing such a unethical practice, because Hindenburg itself, according to them, they believes in ethical corporate management. According to them, they are activist short sellers, or means they are actually some corporate firebrand operators who are very much focused on some of the company's ethical and corporate practices. For example, why they targeted Adani Group? They targeted Adani Group because they firstly cited their own name, that is Hindenburg. Hindenburg, as you can see, this was a massive, human-made disaster which could have been avoided, right? As we can see here, it took place in the early, 20th century. It was when a huge hot air, aircraft collapsed on itself by killing many people. And while it is said that it is actually the main cause or say blame of the operators, and here Hindenburg believes that it is due to various malpractices in the corporate world, that they are doing short selling to actually deliberately decrease the stock prices and the company's performance. According to them, Adani Group involved in various stock manipulation cases, various say insider trading cases, and various other unethical corporate practices according to Hindenburg, right? So this is why they intentionally short sold them. And according to this fresh allegations, according to them, we have to first understand the timeline of events. In 2023, firstly, Hindenburg released this Adani Group report, right, where it told that Adani Group have involved in various stock manipulation practices and so on. That is what it makes Adani a very non-trustworthy company. And therefore, before releasing this report, Hindenburg has actually were actually involved in short selling Adani stocks. And around the same time, there was a particular fund known as K India Opportunities Fund, who allegedly also around the same time only, around say before the report or after the report, around the same time, right, allegedly start selling Adani shares and profits from a short selling position. Position means short sell position, right, or say short sell trade. And also in June 27, 2024, recently, right now, right, SEBI gave a show cause notice to Hindenburg for violations relating to short selling activity. Now Hindenburg is telling that there was another fund also which did short selling right before me, and also around the same time. This fund is actually, according to them, no other than the Kotak Mahindra Bank Group, and the K is standing for Kotak, right? So this main allegation of Hindenburg is that SEBI's jurisdiction, firstly, is not extending to US investors, so they cannot send them a show cause notice. First, secondly, Hindenburg actually using their activism, they actually serve like and whistleblower, right? But SEBI is not, according to them, promoting such practices. And finally, Kotak Bank's involvement in this matter is kind of being unseen by SEBI, according to Hindenburg, right? So these are the new allegations that the Hindenburg Group research has actually proposed here. In the next article, we'll be looking into the various aspects of parliament sessions and the terminologies related to them. Because recently the Lok Sabha has been adjourned sine die, and Rajya Sabha continues discussion on the President's address. Now, it is very, very important for prelims to understand the aspects of Indian polity, Indian governance, and also from GS2, we have to understand the parliament and how it is structured, functioning, and how it does its business. Now, when we talk about, say, the sessions of parliament, according to Article 85 of the Indian Constitution, the central legislature should be summoned at least once a year, right? And here, not more than 12 months can eclipse between two sessions. That means in a year, there must be a minimum of 2 sessions. And when we talk about sessions are actually defined as the period of the first sitting of a house and the prorogation or dissolution of his house, right? Now, we also find that there are various types of sessions. We have the very first session of the year, that is the budget session, monsoon session, and the winter session. And we have to understand that there were exceptions in this conduct of the sessions in 2020 due to COVID crisis, when the winter session was cancelled. Okay, so this is where we have to understand. And also, the cabinet committee, right, is actually the main authority when we talk about, say, the main announcement of the sessions. And also this is formalized by the president, in whose name the MPs are supposed to meet. And when we talk about the session's termination, how a session ends, it can be terminated by adjournment sine die, and prorogation, dissolution. But dissolution is not applicable for Rajya Sabha. And also, when we talk about recess is actually a time period between the prorogation of a house and its reassembly in a new session. Now, let us look at some other terms. Adjournment is actually defined as suspension of work for a specified time. That can be hours, weeks, days, right? And also, reassembly time is actually specified with the, adjournment. And adjournment is very importantly to be noted. It is terminating a sitting. It is not terminating a session. And authority is actually deriving from the presiding officer of the house. And here when we talk about say adjournment sine die, it is actually terminating a sitting of the parliament for an indefinite period. That means there are no days or weeks which have been told that again we will be sitting. So it is for an indefinite period. And again the authority is with the presiding officer, and reassembly will be then when the presiding officer will be calling a meeting on a particular date or time, right after this kind of adjournment. So these differences are very, very important for your prelims. Secondly, when we talk about dissolution, dissolution is actually the ending the life of the existing house. New house can be constituted after general election, right? And also this is only applicable to the Lok Sabha. The methods will be say automatic on the tenure or the expiration of the tenure of 5 years, or say maybe it can be also extended during national emergency. It can be also done by the president, right, on the advice of the council of ministers, or if the council of ministers lose confidence, right, and they are irrevocable. And only once Lok Sabha is dissolved before the end of his normal tenure, the dissolution is irrevocable, right? And finally, prorogation, it means that terminating of a session by the president under Article 85 of the Constitution. It means that the president issues a notification, and prorogation terminates both the sittings and session, and usually follows adjournment sine die. Right, and effects on all notices is that all notices except those for introducing bills will be lapsing. Now we will be looking into the various conditions of the bills and the various aspects of their lapsing status with reference to Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Now any bill that is originated in the Lok Sabha but could not be passed will be lapsing. A bill which is originated and passed by the Lok Sabha but pending in the Rajya Sabha will also be lapsing. A bill that will be originated in Lok Sabha but passed by it but remains pending in Lok Sabha will be lapsing it. A bill originated in Rajya Sabha and returned back to the House by the Lok Sabha with amendments and still pending in the Rajya Sabha on the date of the dissolution of the Lok Sabha is also lapsing. As we can understand that Lok Sabha is kind of unfortunate, where even if it is touching the Lok Sabha once, it will be lapsing, right? And when the bill does not lapse, that is a bill which is pending in the Rajya Sabha but not passed by the Lok Sabha, right? A bill passed by both the houses but pending the assent of the president, they will also not be lapsing. A bill passed by both houses but returned by the President of India for reconsideration, this will also not be lapsing. And finally, some pending bills and all pending assurances that are to be examined by the Committee on Government Assurances, they will be not lapsing on the dissolution of the Lok Sabha, right? So these are all the important things, important points I felt that you should be knowing for your prelims. Finally, we will be looking at 4 important prelim snippets. Firstly, we'll be starting with Abhay Mudra because of its reference in the Lok Sabha recently. See, mudras in Buddhism particularly means a particular posture of hand or bodily movement, and it is depicted. It is actually accorded a very symbolic movement or symbolic posture in Buddhism. Firstly, in the early Buddhist phases, we have to understand that there was no image worship or physical depiction of Buddha. So mainly it was via the use of symbols and symbols like mudras that the various disciples and the followers of Buddhism usually is to adhere to. Generally, we moved on to the physical depiction of Lord Buddha. And we have to understand the earliest mudras were actually only of 4 types that was actually specified in the Gandhara art. As we can see, Abhay Mudra, Bhumi Sparsha Mudra, Dharma Chakra Mudra and Dhyan Mudra. But with the evolution of Mahayana and the Vajrayan Buddhism, as we can see, there are various other forms of mudras that is also given here. You can also find this in your handouts. Please do look at the various names, particularly the main structure, main purpose of the main 4 mudras. Now, when we are talking about this Abhay Mudra typically means fearlessness, the gesture of protection and kindness towards each other. This is actually a symbol where we have to understand the protection or do not fear messages are given with a gesture of reassurances. The next one, we'll be looking into the Archaeological Survey of India, which is a central government agency under Ministry of Culture. It was founded in 1861 by Sir Alexander Cunningham, and it is a statutory body which is under the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act of 1958. The main functions that they conduct is firstly excavations, surveys and explorations of various historical sites, maintains and conserves more than 3,650 archaeological sites and historical structures in the country, regulates all the archaeological activities, publishes research papers, reports and books, and also promotes public awareness on various historical documents and various historical occasions too. In the next one, we'll be looking into the invasive alien species, and these are the organisms that are introduced to a new environment which where previously they were not home to, or say native to, and they reproduce rapidly once introduced there, and they spread aggressively. There are many, for example, examples of say water hyacinths, as we can see in this picture, right? We can understand that these, for example, water hyacinths were not native to India, but once they were introduced to India via colonialism during the last 300 years, right, they were rapidly spreading in the Indian wetlands, and because of the vast amount of nutrients availability in our Indian wetlands, the water hyacinths reproduced massively and spread aggressively, thus encapsulating all of the wetlands, particularly when we talk about this example, and depleting the various supplies of oxygen and sunlight to the various organisms within the pond or say within the wetland. So this is a very dangerous kind of say invasive species, and the main issues are firstly they outcompete the native species for resources like food and space. They predate on native species, leading to population decline or extinction. They also disrupt the natural ecosystems or food webs. They also introduce new diseases and parasites. They also causes economic losses by damaging crops, forestry and infrastructure. And according to this, we have this Convention on Biological Diversity, where India is also part of, where it has one of the provisions to fight the invasive alien species. Finally, we'll be looking into the Kenyan protests. As we can firstly understand, recently there are various amounts of protests across Kenya. This is regarding a recent finance bill in the country to increase the taxation rates, and this is what have outraged, particularly after the various economic hardships that local people are facing. And there has been serious security clampdown in which actually killed more than around 30-40 people in the nation. And finally, we find that the government later they withdrew this bill, but again the people right now are having new demands, firstly to address the police brutality, to address corruption in the administration of Kenya, and finally to take broader economic reforms and also address the economic grievances. This matter is very important for us to also look at the map. Firstly, we find that Kenya, within the middle of the Kenya, right, we have the equator passing, very important. Then we have various important lakes such as Lake Victoria, Lake Turkana, which is also known as Lake Rudolph, right, on the borders of Kenya. We have important cities like Nairobi, Nakuru, Eldoret, right? So these are all the important cities along with Mombasa. On the eastern side, we have the Indian Ocean, right? And also the various neighboring nations are Ethiopia, South Sudan, Uganda and Tanzania, right? So we have these amount of countries which are bordering along with Somalia too. So I thank you all for being a very patient audience. This was all for today. Do not forget to attempt the quiz which is following up. All the best for your future. We'll be meeting again soon. Thank you.